Most people think breakup pain comes down to your attachment style, anxious or avoidant. But new research shows that's not actually what decides how much you suffer. It's your coping. Here's what the study found. The people who punish themselves, who obsess, replay chats, blame themselves, stay stuck in anxiety and depression. But the people who learn to accept, learn to reframe and build new routines, recover faster, no matter their label. That's why in this video, I want to shift the focus away from what style you are and onto how to cope. Because if you're anxious after a breakup, it's not that you're doomed. It means that your default coping is making it harder. Stick around because I'll walk you through the exact patterns the study uncovered and the small shifts that can completely change your healing trajectory. So we're going to use this study for this video. The reason I want to base this video on the study is it's not that I want to convince you that what I'm telling you is right, but rather use any of the content that I'm using based on scientific studies more than gut feel or things that I've read from someone, from a friend. Nowadays, we are quite lucky that there's plenty of studies around relationships, around attachment style. And in this one, I think it's very helpful, especially if you have a hard time dealing with a breakup, because it gives you basically the framework of what works, what doesn't work. So it's not a question of believing me, it's just a question of looking at the study. I'll put the link of the study in the description if you want to read it. It's quite heavy, and I will attempt to make this video a little bit easier to digest. Hopefully, let me know actually in the comment section if you want me to cover more studies and have some sort of a love lab to explain a little bit how we function, how we behave, and the psychology of relationship. So the reason it matters, the reason I wanted to make this video is because sometimes we label, I'm anxious, I'm avoidant, and because I'm anxious, I react this way, and because I'm avoidant, I react this way. What's important is this idea of the label doesn't define how you will experience the breakup. If you do the right actions, if you follow the right mindset. So it's something that you can change. What matters is what you do after the breakup, right? So if you're not aware, if you're not watching this video and you break up with someone, you have an anxious attachment style, yes, your experience of the breakup will be somehow similar to other people who are anxious, but that's not because you're anxious, it's because you didn't know about this. So if you change the coping mechanism, you change the trajectory. That's what I want you to do today, not in a week, not in 1 month, it's today. And again, a very simple framework that you can apply, and it's proven. It's not something, again, that I make up, it's proven with studies on, actually, it's quite a big group of people doing the study. There are 3 timings in the study. The pre-breakup, so they call it T1, the T2, 1 month, and the T3 and T2 and T3, 1 to 3 months post-breakup. And the idea is to assess the attachment, whether you're anxious, avoidant. So you start sort of the baseline is this. And then T2, you're going to assess the coping families. So how do people cope in a certain situation? I mean, in the context of a breakup. And we have 5 families that I'll explain right after. And then we measure anxiety, depression. So how do people feel after they implemented those coping strategies, the first months after the breakup? How do they feel better? Do they feel more confident? Do they feel anxious, depressed, etc.? So they measure anxious, avoidant, the different types of coping mechanism, and they look at, okay, what works best. That's what we want to discuss today. So they measured, because I didn't do this, they measured the ECR12, so it's the attachment assessment, basically a tool that I use with my clients every single day. Coping, the RCOP that they made up, and distress, BSI, depression and anxiety subscales, basically to assess the level of anxiety and depression. So the 5 coping families: self-punishment, self-blame, obsessive replay, rumination. So the reason it sounds like it's not a coping strategy, but it's what people do. And it's what people do because sometimes we feel, because it's familiar, because I recognize this little voice, telling me you're not good enough, you're not worthy of love. And so unconsciously, we will use this coping strategy after a breakup. Accommodation, so it's about acceptance, positive reframing, replacing routine. Avoidance, around denial, disengage, distract, blaming the other. Self-help, which is around expressing feelings, leaning on support, and approach. So planning, take action, focus on what we can solve. So obviously, when you look at those coping families, makes sense which ones are the more would deliver the best result. That doesn't mean that avoidance is actually a good strategy. That doesn't mean necessarily that approach is a good strategy. I'm a big believer in Pareto principle, and I think a lot of therapists should apply this framework more often. This idea of 80% of the effort usually deliver 20% of the effort delivers 80% of the output. And the problem that I see with therapists is that they don't have this idea of I need to be efficient. What I'm saying is that I don't work with my clients for years, and especially in the context of breakup and helping people to deal with the breakup, to bounce back after a breakup. It shouldn't be something that takes 6 months. In the study, measures 1 month, month 2, month 3. And this is I think, a realistic time horizon, not necessarily to move on completely from a breakup, but to manage this breakup, to feel better after this breakup. And so this idea is like, rather than using those 5 coping strategies, like finding the best ones, the ones that will deliver the best outcome for you. So I'm going to share the insights from the study. The first insight is coping is that what we do is more important than the label. Where you start, whether it's your attachment, whether it's how you feel, doesn't really matter. What predicts how you feel is the actions that you take. So that's why, for me, as a coach, as a therapist, I'm very into what are the actions, what can we implement, what can we change, because that will actually change your own reality. Okay, so that's why you can be anxious and someone is anxious. The way you will experience this breakup would be different if he or she is doing the work and you're not. Okay, so right now, basically, this video is a call to action for you to do this work because you can do it. So don't limit yourself to, I'm anxious and I've experienced this before. And every time I break up with my partner, I feel this way. You can change this. And again, it's not me saying this. It's not because I'm preaching and because I manifest this. It's because studies have shown that you can change this experience yourself. Insight number 2, only 2 levels matters. The first one is this idea of self-punishment. That creates, kind of I didn't have to spoil you on this. That leads to more anxiety, more depression. The other one, the positive one, again, the Pareto thing. Let's focus on one thing that works. It's accommodation. It's acceptance. It's positive reframing. It's replacing routine. That will create less depression. So the thing is, yes, it's good to have good support system. Yes, it's good to sort of distract yourself, but that's not what will deliver the best output. The best output is finding something where you would finally be in the acceptance phase. Yes, you can plan this because that's your other coping mechanism, but planning will not give as much result as this accommodation coping mechanism. So if you beat yourself up, you're stuck. If you accept and you replace routine, you recover. It's as simple as that. So then it's about how you accept, and that's what I'm going to discuss in a second. What you need to understand is, rather than reflecting, because I know a lot of people do that, and let me know actually in the comment section if that's the case for you. Ruminating on things, looking at your phone, looking at the latest message that you had from your ex, trying to assess their stories, their feed on Instagram, making sense, etc. That will keep you stuck. You will never find any insight, any information that will make you feel better. It's a temptation because you want to make sense of this situation. And because you want to make sense of this situation, our brains are usually it struggles to process information when there's gap in the narrative. Okay. And we can become obsessed of filling up the gaps. It's useless. It's going to make you feel stuck. It's not going to give you the answers you want. Rather than doing that, be in the movement, go at the gym, change your routine, call a friend, etc., etc. So my advice, and I want to drip feed some tips because it's not only about knowledge, but it's also about actions and things you could be doing this week. I want you to, every time you self-blame yourself, you catch these thoughts, so keep a journal, you replace with an action that you'll do, not tomorrow, not next week, in the next hour. So anytime, that's why I use journaling a lot with my clients, especially when we start working together, especially when the breakup is difficult. Okay, those negative self-talk, can we sort of write them down, understand whether they're accurate, and find ways to, it's not about distraction, it's like being in the movement, moving forward. The idea, I often say it's not about moving on, it's about moving forward. You don't know exactly what will happen next, but the question is like, remove all the strategies that are not helping, ruminating, reassessing. In a way, you think that you're reflecting on the relationship, but you're stuck in replaying the scenarios. That will prevent you from moving forward. Insight number 3, the reason the anxious path is difficult is because if you don't do the work, when you have an anxious attachment style, you tend to be harder on yourself. When you look at attachment, the attachment grid, anxious, avoidant, the anxious have a negative view of themselves. Where avoidant, they have a high view of themselves. They have high avoidance, but higher view of themselves. That's why sometimes in relationships, you have this dynamic where you feel like, somehow the avoidant person has some sort of control, feels more confident in the relationship. The problem with this self-punishment is that it creates more anxiety, more depression, months 2 to 3. Okay? And because of that, you have less accommodation because you can't believe, right? So the problem with self-punishment is that you dismiss any narratives, any voices in your head that are quite positive towards you. You don't want to hear them. You don't want to believe them. So the work what I do with my clients is like, okay, let's challenge those thoughts. Let's look at the proof. Let's validate things. Let's try to challenge the way you look at things. The label will help you, but it's about having this habit of self-sabotaging, self-attacking yourself. So sometimes I know how to do it, and you do journaling, etc. But there's a part in your brain telling you, who are you? Who are you to tell yourself you're beautiful, you're talented, you are lovable, etc., etc. There's that little voice, maybe coming from your childhood, telling you, who are you to be so nice with yourself? And so that's why you have this idea of judging, it's my fault, I should have done things differently, looking again at the chats, like, I should have said that. When he told me this, when she told me that, I should have understood. Reframing here today, or the mindset shift is treat this as you're a scientist. You're collecting data. You're not a judge. Okay, you need to shift from I'm a judge, I'm judging myself, my actions, myself, my past. No, you're a scientist. And find the proof, find the data. Because when you look at the data, there's no label on the data. And then map out what will help you. So it could be around the environment, sleep, meal, walk, things to make you feel better. Okay, so it's very important. Don't be the judge, be the scientist. One very interesting insight from the study, again, it's something that I see every day, but it's always interesting to see the proof in a scientific study, is that avoidant, they have this coping mechanism of distracting themselves. They somehow have more self-punishment, but towards the end. So at the beginning, they're fine, but the anxiety would raise at month 3. So there's a delay if you compare anxious and avoidant. Again, anxious and avoidant who haven't done the work, they are more depressed than month 1 because they delay things because they feel I'm going to numb myself. I'm going to push the emotions away. And that's why they can look fine right after a breakup. But the thing is, those emotions will catch up later. So it looks from the outside, I'm busy, I'm fine, I'm going to work, everything's fine on Facebook, on Instagram, going on holidays with friends, etc. But month 3, it's not necessarily month 3, but the time frame of the study is months 1, 2, 3. But later down the line, this is where it's catching up. This is where they think, okay, hold on. Now I'm starting to feel depressed. Now I'm starting to feel disconnected with who I am, with what I want. So if you're avoidant, don't mistake the fact that I'm fine or this numbness for healing. That's a huge mistake that I used to do when I was younger. Is this idea, because I have no emotion, because I numb myself, I'm fine. No, because when you push things down, you put some pressure for things to stay, underneath the sea level, at some stage that will resurface and you will pay the price with depression and you don't know why, burnout, you can't function, you're stuck, you don't want to speak with anyone, and you don't know why. It's because before that, there were some emotions that you didn't manage to process properly. And as I said a little bit in the intro, the other insight is that avoidance is not a good coping mechanism. When you test all the coping mechanism, avoidance didn't mediate the distress, didn't help to feel less anxious. Again, the biggest driver are self-punishment in the negative way and accommodation. That's the only way to sort of manage this. Accommodation is the only way and the best way to manage this breakup properly. So being busy, going to the gym, etc. And I see those tips online. They are fine, but that's not what will move the needle. And I think it's important to have the right environment, the right support system, but it's not what will deliver the best result. So that's why a lot of people, they go to the gym, they read books, they watch videos, and they come back at home crying, lost, stuck, depressed, and feel like, I'm doing everything that I see online, everything. I'm working out, I'm eating healthy, I see friends, but still, because there's inside themselves this idea of like, I can't accept. So my advice, and it's something that you can do with a therapist, obviously easier to do with someone, but you can do it on your own. Spend 10 minutes to reframe. What did I learn? What needs to change next time? And sort of what are the habits that I need to implement? I see those situations, breakups, as an opportunity to redesign your life on things that are more aligned with who you are. Because sometimes in a relationship, we lose ourselves, we become complacent, we lose track of what we really want or what we really or who we really are. So it's a blank piece of paper. Write your story, right? See it like this. And try to spend time reframing the negative things that will influence this new life. It's not a new life, but this new chapter. But let's discuss a second what is acceptance, because it's as we said, the best strategy. It's about, acceptance, which is, by the way, the latest stage of the grieving process. Optimism, positive reframing, replacement. These are tools to accommodate, to really change. Again, as I said, if we look at the chapter, to really start writing this new chapter. It's accepting that you can't fix the past. You can't go back in time. That's why ruminating in the past, reflecting on things is not helpful. I'm not saying you should not reflect on your responsibility in the breakup and reflect on the relationship. That's what I do with my clients when we work together, but it's the first session. That's it. I don't really care, because I think in half an hour, I will get everything that I need to know about the relationship, and that's enough for you. So then it's about, what can I write? How can I write this new story? Being, the optimism, removing negative self-talk, replacing with positive self-talk. The reframing, that's, cognitive reframing. You can do it with CBT, DBT. Replacement is, again, finding ways to craft your environment in a way that's more aligned with who you are. My tip is for you to write a 3-line acceptance script you read every morning. So it sounds like affirmations. It's like affirmation, sorry. But it's kind of, again, working through cognitively overloading your brain with positive self-talk. Reminding yourself of who you are. Reminding yourself of what you want. And every single day, build on that. Remind yourself of that. Again, the idea is you have those voices, those negative self-talk telling you, you're not worthy of love. It's always the same. You don't deserve love. They will leave you because they always did. Okay? These thoughts, these voices are based on your insecurities. Work on these insecurities. Don't judge yourself. Be the journalist. Investigate on things. Be the scientist. What is accurate? What is interpretation? And finding ways when you have those self-talk to challenge those self-talk, because sometimes it's not because you're thinking about this that it's the truth. It's something that I read recently, and I think it was a game changer. Sometimes our brains would process fake information. And we think, oh, because I'm thinking about that, this is my reality and it's accurate. No. Sometimes we bug. Sometimes we convey ideas that are based on false information, assumptions that were wrong, on insecurities. And because of the way we grew up, because of how we perceive our primary attachment figure, we will define some kind of scenario and rules. These rules can be bent. These scenarios can be rewritten. That's your job. That's what you have to do today. This part is more for therapists, and I'm sure they are aware of this study. If they're not, if you're a therapist, have a look at the description. I think it's really about what therapists need to focus on is the awareness, the idea of working through those patterns, of shedding a light on what's unconscious and working through those things. Removing, so hyperactivation is when you're anxious, deactivation is when you're avoidant, and replacing with accommodation, right? Because those things are, again, as I said, I think I'm repeating myself, but it's very important. This is the thing that will move the dial. And it's about like noticing your style, and you swap the habit. Again, it's something that you need to learn. So you're not gonna, implement that in one day. You can just take one step every day to implement something different. The way it works, the model that I use with my clients is being self-aware. Okay, there's a thought, there's something that I don't feel necessarily, I don't feel comfortable. I feel a certain way. Okay, you catch this. This is your trigger to, okay, if I feel in a certain way in my gut, in my belly, my throat, depending on how you experience it, this is your signal. Okay, there's something triggering here. What does it mean? What can I do? How can I unpack this? You do that every day. You do that every time you feel this, you'll build that emotional resilience. And what you have to do, what you could do is like having, so I do with my clients, some sort of scoreboard. So design whatever you want, however you want it to be, around sleep, steps, how many times you ruminate, the thoughts, and looking at, okay, I felt every day, I felt in a certain way. I did this and that. Okay, what can I do today differently? I felt a little bit tired because, I don't know, I had coffee at 5 p.m. because, okay, I'm going to kick this. I felt good because I went for a walk before going to work. Okay, I'm going to continue. Okay, and be, again, the scientist. Don't judge. For example, if you feel tired, rather than thinking, oh, I'm tired, I'm so stupid, I should be more focused at work. No, you're tired. What would a scientist do? I'm tired. Maybe you go on ChatGPT, maybe you check online. What can I implement? And test things. Because, for example, running might work for you or might not work for you. You can only know if you implement. That's why it's important to be in the reframing, in the acceptance, in changing things, creating that new, again, the new chapter, working towards novelty and assessing. Because again, as I said, maybe running is not for you. Maybe it's about journaling. Maybe it's about just walking. Maybe it's about swimming. I hate swimming, for example, and I've tried it, right? And I'm not going to blame myself that I don't like swimming. I will find other things to do rather than swimming. So again, try to work through those things. It's going to be kind of new. It's kind of learning a new way of looking at things. And I think that's the value in a way that you can derive from breakups. Yes, it's not the ideal way or situation to work on yourself, but so be it. You're there. Your job is to figure out how to use this experience and use it as a fuel to design again something different, to design a life that is in line with who you are and what you want to achieve in terms of relationship with your partner, with your next partner, and also with yourself. Let's recap for a second. And by the way, if you find this video helpful, let me know in the comment section. Subscribe, it helps people watching this video in YouTube. And you can also like. Coping is way more important than labor. So if you're anxious, that wouldn't determine how you will experience the breakup. The two things that matters is self-punishment. This is the best way for you to be stressed, stuck. The best way for you to heal and move forward after the breakup is accommodation, acceptance, reframing, replacement routine. This is the only way you can work towards healing. As I said, the styles, they don't set the tone. It's a tendency that it can change with strategies and having those actions, putting those actions in place. Avoidance, they look fine at the beginning. They push things away, but the distress will come after. So if, for example, if you broke up with an avoidant and you feel that right now, they don't feel affected, they are fine. They are like, okay, that's not an accurate representation of how they will feel 2 or 3 months down the line. The thinking that, again, if your partner is avoidant, that avoiding is the best way to deal with things. No, studies have shown that it's not the case. It's not the best way because, again, things will catch up. The only way to test this relationship, to test also yourself, is to create a secure base path. You regulate your emotion. You find ways to reframe, to replace. So it's like the accommodation element. Then you implement the new routines, that new life. And then you assess, you expose this with your partner. Maybe the door is not open, maybe there's no opportunity. But by assessing this, you get your answer. You'll be able to move on. Because sometimes it's even harder to move on when things are confusing. When your ex is around, you're still in touch, they seem affectionate, but it's not leading anywhere. So that's why it's important to create that secure base first, feeling confident in yourself, knowing what you want to achieve, knowing, designing in your head, visualizing the right relationship, and then exposing this with your partner and make that decision for yourself. If you have any questions, if you are confused about your relationship, there's a quiz as well in the description. I'll see you next time. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.